Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another spooky episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Ghoul. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. Before we get into today's episode, I want to do a bit of housekeeping, because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on everything and anything that I'm doing, watching and reading and all that jazz. Make sure that you follow me on YouTube and you leave a like, comment and subscribe. Also, if you listen to this on Spotify, on your mobile phone, don't forget to leave a star rating. If you can do all three things for me right at the beginning, I will be eternally grateful. So today, we're going to be looking at the 1988 cult classic remake of the original from 1958, The Blob. I've been really excited to watch this one for so long, ever since I watched the stuff. This is one that's been on my radar since, and I'm so glad that we're getting to it this year. If you want to go back and check out what I've covered so far, so for week 1, I looked at The Critters 2. Last week, I looked at Chopping Mall. And obviously this week, we're looking at The Blob. And the next week, just before we get to Halloween, we're going to have one final big push, big movie, and it's going to be rather creepy. Well, it is for me, especially if you have a phobia of certain creature. But we'll get there when we get there. One thing I want to state right at the very beginning is there might be some explicit words, some swears, some rude language, that sort of thing. Usually I tend to keep myself quite tame, and I kind of keep myself under wraps in terms of swearing, because I like to make sure that my podcast is eligible for everybody. But because it's Halloween, and because it's a special season, and because I'm looking at, these very cheesy sort of B-movie horrors, I've decided to let myself go a bit. So you might hear some swear words, you might hear some rude words and things like that. So I just thought I'd give you a warning, heads up, if you listen to this in your car, on your radio, or if you've got kids in the back for some or no reason, while you listen to a review of The Blob. Just want to give you a bit of a warning here that there might be some rude, explicit words in the actual review itself, but you're okay for now in the introduction. So I just thought I want to state it here. So, as I mentioned, I just want to quickly talk about this is a remake of the original Blob from 1958 with Steve McQueen, which I didn't know Steve McQueen was in that movie. That was one of the very fascinating things I found while I was doing my research into this movie before I got around to doing the introduction and got around to watching it, was that, I was going to look into The Blob, try to find out the production, get all sort of my facts together. And when I found out it was a remake, it really surprised me, because I remember, I've never watched the original film, but I remember watching, I think, was it Gremlins? Or it was like a movie like that where it was on in the background. Or like you had like a giant spider or something like that. And I remember that there was a scene of like somebody's in the cinema, and these people come running out of the cinema because this big giant blob basically is coming through the cinema. It's like slime. Maybe that's the same movie or not. I can't remember the movie that I actually saw it in. So I've never actually watched the movie, but I've seen the movie referenced in another film. I just can't remember what film that is. Maybe it's The Last Action Hero. I can't remember. But basically, I remember seeing something like that for the original. So it did surprise me that Steve McQueen was in it. I didn't know. And now it's on my radar. I've now got to go back and watch the original 1958 Blob after I've seen this one to see how they compare. Maybe I'll do it later at the end. Maybe it's a little, or maybe I'll do a little review at the very end. If I have time, I'll see if I can do like a mini review of the 1958 movie at the end of, obviously, the main review. It's coming later. We'll see. Anyway, so moving on, we have the synopsis. So, a remake of the 1958 Steve McQueen film of the same name, which follows a jelly-like organism that crashed down to Earth from a meteorite and then dissolves anything in its path, thereby growing in size. Military men step in to contain the situation, but one rebellious kid knows the secret and will not give in to the commands of the authorities. The Blob. Not really doing great for me today, IMDb, but that is our setting. That is what the story is about. As for the cast, so we have Shawnee Smith, who plays Meg Penny. One thing I want to note here that always makes me giggle is the fact of when I looked at this cast, as soon as I saw her face, I recognised her. And where I recognise her from is a bit sort of weird and obscure. she is in Armageddon. She doesn't have a big role. She plays the redhead, and no, I'm not being mean. Generally, that is what her character name in that movie is called. She plays the redhead, and she's basically the girl who Steve Buscemi is flirting with and looking at the ring on her finger and saying, "This ring is fake," and then offers her a drink, and then he gets taken by like the FBI to NASA. It's a bit strange because, again, I know she's an actress, she's been in other films, but whenever I saw her face, that's all I can think of is that one scene from Armageddon that she's in. But she's in this leading role. She plays Meg Penny. And then you've got Kevin Dillon, who plays Brian Flagg. Again, Kevin Dillon, I've seen him in a few things, but he's only ever been a background actor. To be honest, actually, if I'm on IMDb at the moment, if I click on his account, he was in Poseidon, which I remember he was in that. He played a douchey bloke in Poseidon. He was in Platoon. Don't remember much about Platoon, but I remember he was in it. He was in The Doors. Again, he was in The Blob. He's been in a lot of them. Mobland, Reagan, Buddy Games, On the Line, Wire Room, Hot Seat, blah blah blah. Some of the movies I've seen him in, some of them haven't, but I know he's usually a background character. So this would be my first proper experience of seeing him actually as a leading man. So that should be interesting. Then you've got Donovan Leitch Jr., who plays Paul Taylor. Jeffrey Duman, he's been in loads of movies. We all recognise this man. He was in The Green Mile, for example. He plays one of the constables. Great actor. He plays Sheriff Herb Geller. Candy Clark plays Fran Hewitt. Joe Sinicra plays Dr. Meadows. Then you got Del Close, plays Revered Mika. Paul McCrane, plays Deputy Bill Briggs. Sharon Spillman plays Miss Penny. Bu Bileski plays Moss Woodley. Art Lefleur, great name, plays the pharmacist. Again, that guy, legendary actor. Ricky Paul Golden plays Scott Jesse. Robert Axelrod, great name. Robert Axelrod, what a great name. Plays Jennings. And then Bill Moseley plays Soldier number 2. So that is our cast for The Blob. So as I was looking into this, if you listen to Chopping Mall, you probably heard that I found an analysis for that movie that somebody did. I found another one for this film, and because that one was so fascinating, and I read this one, and this one's really quite fascinating as well, and kind of puts a different sort of spin on the movie, for me anyway, when I come around to watching it. I just thought I'd mention it here. So the analysis I found goes like this. So the film functions as a conspiracy theory film. The threat of the original film wasn't an alien entity from outer space. The remake differs in making the threat a biological weapon, created by a secret government agency. The blob is closely followed by soldiers and scientists in protective suits. The change reflects the mentality of a more cynical era. The sinister government agents are opposed by rebellious teenager Brian Flagg. His depiction as a rebel and a tough guy punk includes wearing a leather jacket, sporting long hair, riding a motorcycle, and distrusting authority figures. Del Close, who betrays revered Mika, played an eye patch wearing hobo in the 1972 movie Beware the Blob, which was a sequel to the original 1958 film. So there's a lot to unpack there. So this is a sort of conspiracy theory movie, which again was very popular for the time. If you read any sort of the Stephen King books around about this time, you had a lot of stuff against the government, the agency, that sort of thing. Firestarter. I think Firestarter was the 80s anyway. But you had a lot of movies like that, and a lot of books, and a lot of ideas of, you can't trust the government, you can't trust anybody, they're hiding things and that sort of stuff. So there was that sort of time, an era. And then you have like the tough guy sort of thing of like, the punk sort of because during like the 80s and 90s, there was this change in the publicist for the young people. A lot of people were listening to sort of, shall we say, alternative music. We're listening to rock, and this whole idea of like D&D's evil, and we'll taint the kids and blah blah blah. So you had that genre, that beginning of the punk, the beginning of the goth, the emo, the sort of like wearing a lot of dyeing their hairs and wearing black clothing and getting piercings and tattoos and that sort of thing, like being proper rebels. Right nowadays, they are still pretty cool and awesome, but back then, like, it was the worst thing you could do. But that's the idea of top punk. Like, I don't care about authority, so there's those tropes there of this sort of 80s sort of feel of it, and also that bit of trivia there that we have like a returning character from one of the original sequels to the original movie, so that was pretty cool. As for the production, so screenwriter Frank Darabont first met director Chuck Russell in 1981 while working as a production assistant on the film Hell Night before working together on The Blob. The two also collaborated on the script for A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. That's the second time that Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street has appeared in this Hollywood special. If I had a penny for every time that happened, I'd have 2 pennies, which is not a lot, but it's strange it happened twice. That's a reference that some people might get, some people might not get. If you do get it, you're awesome. Anyway, carrying on. So in 1986, New World Pictures purchased the rights to make a remake of The Blob featuring the original film's producer, Jack H. Harris, as an executive producer. A year later, the production switched studios to Cinema Group Pictures. Actor Del Close had been scheduled to direct a mock opera about Ronald Reagan at New York's Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts during the filming of The Blob. However, the production was cancelled and he was unexpectedly available to audition for The Blob. Production began on January the 11th, 1988, and the cast and crew of approximately 150 staying at a travel lodge in Abbeville, Louisiana. Due to the large amount of night shooting, the cast often slept during the day, and on the days off, they watched videos at the hotel and ate crawfish, a popular item of local cuisine. Special effects in the film were handled by Tom Gardner. Gardner was originally supposed to provide only a few small effects, with special effects artist Lyle Conway originally being in charge of the effects. However, after personal changes, he ended up running a crew of 33 people, including artist Chet Zar and mechanical effects designer Bill Sturgeon. In creating the titular blob creature, the specialist effects team used silk bags filled with miracle cellulose. Fangoria reported methacalil, a thickening agent for food, creating what the team described as a blob quilt. For the few minutes of screen time near the end of the film, where revered Mika has a scene with flesh burns and another with healed burns, actor Del Close required 5.5 hours of makeup preparation for fresh burns and 7.5 hours for healed burns. Jesus Christ. Bloody hell. Then again, I say that, but in all fairness, Jim Carrey sat in the chair for probably just as long as that as he was putting together for the Grinch, and he had to have like somebody from the CIA to teach him torture techniques to how to survive that kind of stuff. So that will always be sort of top notch for me. But he's sitting there for that many hours just to get all these work done, just sitting there. God, your bum and your legs must go numb. But one thing that I love, going back to the special effects, is that they do a lot of practical effects. So I can't help it. It's off the time. We all get lost down rabbit holes on TikTok and YouTube. We all do it. And I remember last year as I was looking into The Blob, because after I'd watched the stuff, like this movie really sort of interested me. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to have a look a bit more into this movie. And I went down this rabbit hole, and there was just so many videos on TikTok of the background stuff and how they use a lot of practical effects. Like this one scene where this guy is holding up he's like a bookcase up against this door trying to keep the blob out. And as he's standing there keeping this door open, the blob comes through, grabs him around the waist, and then kind of pretzels him, really, like pulls him in, folds him in half, and then he just pulls his whole body through. This whole video explains of how they created that effect and why it looks so real and how they did it. Absolutely fascinating, absolutely incredible. That is a scene I'm really looking forward to actually seeing in the film in full, see the full context behind it. But they did a lot of practical effects. And if you've listened to the podcast long enough, you know how sort of excited I get when practical effects are used. So I'm very, very excited for that. But yeah, as I mentioned, this movie, I've been interested in it since I watched the stuff. I went onto Letterboxd, give my rating and all that, and then it basically got recommended to me. It was like, well, if you watch the stuff, you will like The Blob. And I'm like, The Blob? What's that? And then I looked at the trailer. I'm like, yep, sold. That's it. I'm all here for it. So my excitement right now is quite high, and I feel like this will be the movie of the week. for me, possibly. Not saying like Critters 2 and like Chop 'Em All. I'm not saying they weren't good. They were good for what they were. But this one, because again, how much I love the stuff and I love practical effects and I just love sort of that gory, visceral sort of stuff, as we all know. Because I won't shut up about it this week, this month. This might be the highlight. It really, really might be. It might not, but I am very much excited. So, without further ado. Oh, before I say that, if you want to watch the movie with me, by all means you can. The full movie is on YouTube. So if you want to watch with me like we did with Chopping Mall, then by all means go onto YouTube, type in The Blob, watch the movie, then come back to the review. That's how I'll be doing it, to be honest. I couldn't get a copy in time, and then I found it on YouTube, and I'm like, I'll just watch the full movie on YouTube. So if you want to join me on there, by all means, we'll go over there and watch it on there, and then when we come back, we can listen to my thoughts and feelings and see if you agree with me, if you like the movie, if you didn't like the movie, or if you kind of agree with my points or you don't agree with my points. That's the whole point of these podcasting things, aren't they? We never know until we watch it, and then we give our opinions, and then we can see if other people agree with us. So I'm going to go off and watch the movie. For you like that will as well, let's get to it. And for those that have already seen it or not going to watch it, just want to hear my review, then here it is. Right, so I've just finished watching The Blob, and all I can say is, yeah, baby, that's what I've been waiting for. Zoolander reference there for anybody who's not aware. That is this movie is incredible. It is. It's been what I've been waiting for all month so far, is to get that proper, gore and practical effects and just incredible deaths and kills and slays, and it was just incredible. As you can tell by my voice, and you can probably tell there's a big smile on my face as well. This movie is everything that you want it to be in this sort of film. To be honest, I'd even go as far as to say it doesn't feel like an 80s movie. The production value here, this movie generally feels like it was made in the mid-90s. I was watching this and thinking, this feels like a 90s movie. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just feels newer than it is. In terms of how it all looks, the cinematography, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like it was done on a budget. It feels like people who actually did this movie actually cared about what the subject matter was. Yeah, not all the acting is incredible, but, a lot of the acting there, I was enthralled. I was literally on the edge of my seat, glued. I actually cared about the people. I cared about, who they were and if they was who was going to live and who was going to die. And yeah, there were many moments. And I don't tend to do this with horror movies unless I'm really into them. But I was sitting there going, "Don't do that. Don't go in there. Don't put your hand in there. He's dead." I was properly talking to myself, to the screen, like, "Don't do this. Don't do that. What are you doing this for? They're going to die." And there's just so many great scenes. Like this movie just gets going about 14 minutes in. Once it's set up all the characters and it's set up everything that you want to know, it set up the jock, it set up the prom queen, it set up the rebel sort of character. Straight away, it just goes. It gets going, the blob crashes down, and it's kill after kill after kill after kill. And it's just incredible. This film's awesome. Is it any better than the stuff? The stuff is campy. The stuff is cheesy. The stuff is just basically quintessential 80s. That's what the stuff is, right? This movie is just as good, if not better at some parts, than the stuff. But the stuff is a sort of how best to explain it. The stuff is a film of its time. Whereas even though this was made in the 80s as well, this just feels newer. Even though it was 1988, this movie just feels like it was made in the 90s. It just feels bigger budget, and everything just feels a lot more sort of expensive, and I love it, and it's great. And just how they went with the practical effects of this, how the kills are so inventive. The way that the I was about to call it the stuff. The way the blob works, it feels alive. It feels menacing. It feels creepy. It feels terrifying. And there were many moments where I'm sitting here watching the movie. I'm thinking to myself, this could happen. And I know that sounds absolutely batshit crazy, but think of it. The universe is huge. The universe is ever expanding. You know, what is the chances? Because again, we've all heard of, I was about to say we've all heard of panspermia, but some people probably haven't. For anybody who hasn't, a crash course in panspermia, it's basically the theory that when the Earth was in its primordial stages, when it was first starting to grow and sort of form into the planet that we know today, it was bombarded with asteroids. These asteroids had bacteria, microbes, and stuff like that, bits of life on them that seeded the planet, and that over millions and millions of years, eventually those microbes grew and evolved, and at what we have today with trees, plants, humans, animals, and so on and so forth. And that's basically the whole idea and concept of panspermia on a crash course. Now, take that idea, take that concept. Who knows that in our asteroid belt or somewhere in the universe, there isn't some sort of creature like, the blob that is attached to an asteroid. All it takes is an asteroid to hit a planet like Earth and spread. It could happen. We don't know. We've never encountered anything like it here on Earth. So who's to say it doesn't happen in the universe? Like there is proof of mega fungus that grows rapidly and just takes over things. There's the cordyceps, so again another fungus that sort of turns people into zombies and things like that. When you look deeper into nature, and on here on Earth, you can see the horrors that exist. Who's to say there's not something like that in space? And it's the point I'm trying to get is the fact of, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking this could happen. Like it feels, I know it sounds crazy to say, but it feels like a real sort of premise. And I think that's what kind of got me into it so much, being such a big lover of horror and space and things like that. It's like, this is something that could happen, and this is terrifying. And then, you add on the fact of, the twist that it's a whole military experiment, that it's not from space, even though it was from space because it came out of an asteroid. But either way, it was a military experiment, and they're basically testing this new weapon, and that bit was cool. And as soon as the doctor comes on, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't trust this dude. He's too calm. He's too nice. He's too sort of John Hammond. He's there like Willy Wonka. It's all good. It's all fine. Don't worry. We've got this under control. And I'm sitting there thinking, as soon as the government tells you everything's okay and it's under control and not to panic, that's when you panic. It's simple, basic 101. And it's just, yeah, the beat for beat, shot for shot, this movie had me on the edge of my seat, and I absolutely enjoyed my time all the way through. There was never a moment where I sat there and went, I don't like it, this is crap. Anything like that. Generally, I was off my phone, I was focused, and I was in to the very end. And I won't spoil it, but there is a sort of an ending, not a twist ending, more of a sort of an ending that I saw coming. But it's still one of those, when it happened, I'm sitting there thinking, it hints at a potential sequel. I don't think we ever got a sequel. I don't think there was never a Blob 2. I don't think this movie did very well to do a sequel. Would I like to see a Blob sequel or remake? Because again, this is a remake of the original with Steve McQueen. Would I like to see a modern version of the Blob remake? I don't know. Possibly not, because again, I feel like they would go CGI. I think they would go away from any sort of practical effects. I just don't think it would be good if they did a sequel or remake. Yeah, which shame. But I feel like this movie works as a one and done. You don't need a sequel. You don't need to sort of big it up with anything else. Generally, I'm happy with this movie just being this film, basically. But yeah, that was sort of my first impressions. As for sort of the story, the story's good as well. Like I said, it's not something that's like I said, you're not watching this movie for the acting. You're not watching it for the incredible acting skills. A lot of people do a pretty good job here. There are a lot of good actors here, and they do a good job with the script and what they're doing. You can all tell they're having fun and they're enjoying it. But you're here for the blob. You're here for sort of the different creative ways that this acid sort of blob, this creature, whatever you want, organism, basically is just dissolving people. and they've got some good ones. Like there's this one scene where there's this diner worker, Fran, and she basically she has this blocked sink and she's trying to unblock it, can't do it, and I'm sitting there like, don't do that. Because I'm just waiting for like the sort of Johnny Depp sort of Nightmare on Elm Street. It got referenced again, Nightmare on Elm Street version with Johnny Depp when he gets sucked into the bed and then just like big sort of like fountain of blood comes out. That is what I was expecting. Didn't happen for her. Another guy comes in. I'm like, yeah, Fran, you go away. Like, let this guy die. And then, like, off side note sort of thing. In this movie, you never know who's going to live or die. Usually, you can tell who's going to survive, who isn't. You look at it and go, oh, that's a named character, or that's a sort of celebrity sort of actor that I know and I recognize. They ain't going to die. You wouldn't kill them off X, Y, and Z. You have these moments. But generally, there were many moments in this movie. I was like, I don't know who's going to live, and I don't know who's going to die. Like this movie went as far as like there's this moment in the sewer. Oh God, I'm jumping ahead. Sorry, but I'll go with that one kill and I'll go back to that one. So that there's one with a plunger and she's in the sink, can't do it. Cook comes over and he's going for it with a plunger. It's not working. So he puts his hand in. I'm sitting there going, don't do it. I know it looks, interesting, but don't. You're going to lose your hand. He sticks it in. As soon as he sticks his hands in, it's kind of like, he puts it in, pulls out some like gunk and slime on his hand, and then just like a giant like blob claw comes out, grabs his face, and then just pulls his whole body into the plug hole. Now the plug hole is tiny. This dude's huge, so just plugs this guy in, and it's visceral. It's awesome. I'm sitting there going, that's rad. That is freaking sick. You know what I mean? And then as it pulls him in, you just get a sploosh of just goo and blood just parade the ceiling as the blob comes out and then devours this guy. And like, there's Fran runs to get away. She's get to a phone box. The blob comes out. The blob is actually like encasing the phone box, and she's there trying to fall like the sheriff. Like, where's the sheriff? Can't find the sheriff. And the woman's on the other line. She's like, the sheriff's just gone to the diner, and straight away the camera pulls us to one side to the left. She turns, and in the blob is the sheriff's face pressed up the glass, ink like just been half dissolved. And it was the deliverance of it. That one sort of scene that still was just so incredible, so good. Like, I'm sitting there going, that was awesome. What, like, generally, like, because there were moments where I'm sitting there thinking, I feel like there were cuts, there were moments where like I was missing, but then I thought to myself, no, I don't have to see the sheriff go from like the station to the diner and then get eaten. To have that scene where she's phoning him and the woman goes, oh, he went to go find you at the diner, and then she turns around and he's already been devoured. That is awesome. That's epic. And like, it's one of those where I'm saying, like, don't waste my time and show me things I don't want to see. I want to see the blob devour people. And straight away, I've got it. And there were many moments like this of like, I don't know who's going to live, I don't know who's going to die. And like, going back to what I was saying about this moment in the sewer, where you have Meg and her younger brother and his mate are in the sewer, running away from the blob. And they're trying to climb up these, and like the blobs in the water swimming around chasing them. They're trying to climb up these poles. And then the brother's younger mate, he has to be like 12, 13, just gets pulled under, and she goes to save him, can't find him, and then he just like a jump scare, just jumps up and he's like half devoured, half like like a skeleton. And I'm thinking, this movie went as far as to kill a kid. Like, that's when you know that they were just like anybody's game. Like, it was at that point I was just like, nobody's safe. And that is the crux, and that's the whole point of this movie, is the fact of the blob doesn't it's like the stuff as well, the blob doesn't really choose or differentiate between who's young and who's a kid and who's old and who we should kill and shouldn't kill. It's like, look, I'm going to devour everything, if and it just does. And there are so many great kills, and even that one kill with the deputy where like he's in the he's in the town hall and all the people are panicking, he's blocking up the doors, and then you just get him pretzeled and he gets pulled in, and it's freaking awesome. Like, I know how they did it because, again, as I mentioned, I watched the TikTok video of how the behind the scenes, but just the practical effects here and the blob and how it all looks, and I'm just so good. And like, with this whole story where you have, when it sets up all the characters, and then straight away once you've got all the sort of the intro, you've got who Brian is. Brian is the sort of punky kid, non authority. You've got Meg, the sort of the prom queen. You've got Paul, who is like the football star, sort of the hero sort of character, and then you have this hobo guy who sees this meteor crash, and then it starts devouring him, and then it just goes from there, and then one after the other, it's just kill after kill after kill, and it's great. I really, really enjoyed my time here with this. Like, generally, like if you watch, like I said with Chopping Mall, that is like a pre-drinks sort of movie. That is a movie to get you in the mood for horror, right? If that movie's pre-drinks, this is what you'd watch after it. This is the movie where you're like, okay, I'm in the mood now. I'm ready for some, some proper horror, some good Halloween, cheesy movie. You watch this, and then yeah, I was just magnifique. I loved it. Just such a great film. Such a great film. Generally, this is in my top 10, top 5, top 3 now, to be honest. Like, it was The Stuff, and then Critters, and then Killer Clowns, and I feel like this is up there with like The Stuff. I can't push The Stuff off because Stuff is just incredible and it's so quirky and cheesy. I just love it. So I can't push that off. But generally, I would put like The Blob and The Stuff neck and neck at 1, and then Critters 1, and then like Killer Clowns, because yeah, just great, some great movies. And this is what I love about doing this, is the fact of I'm watching movies that I never would have probably wanted to watch, and that's what I love about doing a podcast. That's what I love about just doing this, is the fact of I'm trying new things. I'm trying movies of like this film. I'm not saying it's a masterpiece. I'm not saying it's the greatest in the world. But I was actually talking about this with a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about the way cinema was and the way movies used to be, and how I miss these days. I miss the days of cinema when, like, directors and creatives, they didn't like. Obviously, they wanted to make money. They wanted to be successful. Of course, they did. At the end of the day, it's a business. But the creative side was still there. There wasn't that worry of let's get an Oscar, let's get awards or anything like that, or let's see if we can make $1 billion. Like, no, like generally it was, let's make a movie, let's try something new, let's do something crazy, let's be creative, let's push the barriers, let's try something that no one's ever tried before. And that's what I'm finding with a lot of these B movies, with a lot of these older films that I'm watching as well, is that you can see the creatives have, like, we just want to make a movie. We don't care if it makes loads of money. We don't care if it wins loads of awards, or if it doesn't win awards or whatever. We just want to make films. And it's just that you don't see movies like that nowadays. You wouldn't see The Blob nowadays. And if you did, it would be CGI, and I don't think it'd be any as good, to be honest. And would people go and see it as well? And that's just the problem with modern cinema, is that I like modern cinema, but I don't watch many movies nowadays. But I remember growing up how weird and wonderful movies were, and that was just like in the early 2000s. And then going back and watching movies from the 90s and the 80s and 70s, even go as far as back as the 60s and 50s, like black and white and stuff like that. Even they were being creative, and there was so much talent, and there was just so much love for the art of movie making. And again, I come back to it. I'm not saying this movie is a masterpiece, but you can generally tell that everybody enjoyed themselves, the actors, the creatives. There was just a lot of fun and love that went into this movie. And I feel like that's what makes it feel newer and more modern than it is, because you can tell there was a lot of love into it. There was a lot done into the shots, into the acting, into the creativeness, that when you watch it, you're like, yeah, I know this movie was made in 1988, but if you told me this movie was made in 1995, I would have believed you. It just has that, you can just feel the emotion. You feel that everybody actually cares and that everybody's having fun. And this is why I watch these sort of movies, because people are just having fun. They have fun, you have fun. Even if the movie is absolutely trash, it's still a good time. And yeah, I think this movie is excellent. I think it's good. I love it. Generally, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend go and watch it. And that is the end of my overall thoughts. Really, is just go watch this movie, put it on this Halloween, and just enjoy. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great kills, a lot of gore. You're on edge all the time. You never know who's going to live. You never know who's going to die. Some people that died generally surprised me. Like, you're sitting there thinking, I just thought they would have lived to the end. There's a interesting sort of ending. I was like a sort of a sequel bait, set up for a sequel that I don't think ever happened. But yeah, overall, fantastic. And it was also, going back to what I was saying about the actors, when I mentioned that Shauna Smith, who again I know her as the redheaded woman from Armageddon, she does a pretty good job here as well. And I sat here thinking, have I seen her in any other movies? And again, I know she was in Saw 2 and 3, and I think she was in Saw 6. So I remember seeing her from in there. But it's one of those where I'm like, she was a pretty good actor. I feel like I've got to do her a bit more justice than just like the redhead girl from Armageddon. I've got to go watch more of her movies. And same with Kevin Dillon. I've never knew him as a leading actor. He's always been like that background sort of douchey sort of character, like that sort of actor, you know. So I've now got off and watch more movies with him, and just to kind of see his range, because again, he does a pretty good job here, to be honest. So yeah, I owe myself to do that, but you owe yourself to go watch this movie. I didn't get a chance to watch the original Blob with Steve McQueen, so I won't be able to add it in here at the end. Maybe I will review that one next year, or I'll do like a separate review of that one. If anybody wants me to, again, let me know. But I am going to watch it. I'm going to give it a go, because again, I want to see the differences of like the original Blob compared to like this remake version of the Blob. So I'm quite excited for that. Before we wrap all things up, I want to do a bit of sort of trivia, because I do enjoy these sort of things. So Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont didn't have a lot of rules for the Blob, but they agreed to the general concept of the creature basically being an inside-out stomach, meaning the acid is burning, melting, and devouring almost everything it touches. It's a monster in its simplest form. There must be something about this thing that can slide under your door, or squeeze through an air vent, or quietly dissolve somebody in the next room. That's very elemental. It just makes monstery sense. It's a fear of the worst death, being eaten. I agree there. If anybody's listened to any sort of the zombie stuff I've spoken about, you will know that I have a fear of being eaten alive by zombies, or just being eaten alive in general. It's an irrational fear, because I live in the UK and there's nothing here that would eat me alive. Like, the only real sort of predators we have here are like badgers and foxes. And yeah, I don't think they're going to eat me alive unless, you know, I'm dead. And then I'm dead. How can you be dead if you're alive? Sorry. That was a weird sort of spooky, scary movie reference. Anyway, but yeah, that's a fear I've got. So like, it is a fear. It is the worst death possible, being eaten alive. Like, horrible. Next bit of trivia. So Chuck Russell is a big advocate of storyboarding shots in advance. When I first came to California, I gate crashed Universal when Hitchcock was still working. Went into Hitchcock's office and said, "I'm here to see Mr. Hitchcock," and I could see him working with a storyboard artist. Donovan Leitch Jr., Paul, took Shawnee Smith Pegg to his senior prom at Hollywood High. He wrote her a thank you note afterwards, which she kept for years. They later appeared together in this film. Oh, that's cute. That's really, really cute. Of the film's reported $90 million budget, $9 million went towards visual effects, although director Chuck Russell claims that both numbers are highly exaggerated and the total budget was closer to just under $10 million. I'm going to talk about that one actually in a second. Chad McQueen was offered a part of Brian Flagg but turned it down. He did so due to disliking the script and to having a strict personal policy of never performing any production based on or inspired by the work of his actor father, Steve McQueen, who was in the original Blob in 1958. Oh, that's quite interesting. I didn't know that one. I'm going to go to what the how much money this movie made. So, not that it's a big important. So the budget was $10 million. It made $8.2 million at the box office. And again, like I said, you don't watch these movies. Like, we all want them to make money. But in my personal opinion, in terms of a film like this, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, they made it for $10 million. But it feels like this movie was made for more. It doesn't feel Like, it doesn't feel like it was made for 10 million. It generally feels like a big sort of production, which I thought was just fantastic. As for sort of the critical response, so on Rotten Tomatoes, a reviewer said The Blob holds a 66% approval rating based on 29 critic reviews and an average rating of 5.9 out of 10. The consensus reads, The Blob can't replicate the B-movie charms of the original, though its fast pace and gory thrills pack enough of a punch to make it a worthwhile update. That one I wanted to mention because I thought was quite interesting. I haven't watched the original yet. I am planning on to, obviously, as I mentioned. So I can't say if this is a better sequel or not. But for what this movie is, I think it's great. I love it and enjoy it. And I think everybody else will too. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about The Blob. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I really, really enjoyed myself. If you watch the stuff and you like that, you'll love this. Yeah, just watch this as Halloween. This is the film you want to watch this Halloween. Like, if you want some good sort of classic horror sort of films, watch this movie. You will not be disappointed. You will absolutely enjoy it. And yeah, it's great. It's cool. It's gory. It's everything that I've waited for so far this month. And I finally got it. And I'm glad it was with The Blob. I wasn't disappointed because I had a lot of hype going in. Had a lot of hope that it would be good and that it'd be, really, really awesome, like the stuff. And I was not disappointed. This movie is everything that I wanted and been waiting for and more. So yeah, that is my thoughts on The Blob. Have you seen it? Let me know. I want to hear all of your thoughts. You can let me know on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. You can let me know on YouTube down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well if you haven't already. And if you listen to this on Spotify and you liked what you heard today, please do leave a star rating and maybe even give me a follow. It helps me out immensely. So yeah, I've been your host, Luke the Ghoul. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye. Sleep tight.